Yo, what is up, everybody? John from Tau Tactics here, bringing you another video. Today we've got an awesome one. We're talking to Donald Plummer about his most recent GT win with Auxiliary Cadre. So first we kind of talk about how he got to the list that he did, the iterations that he went through, how he arrived at Aux Cadre as a detachment, and the matchups, the list, what he would change, all that good stuff. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. Yeah, so thanks again for joining me, Donald. I really appreciate it. You know,
Yeah.
would love to just hear like a little bit about, I have your list pulled up, kind of the thought process behind the list, and it would also be interesting to hear like kind of maybe the iterations that kind of took you to that point, right? Because I don't know about you, but I have been playing a little bit with Aux Cadre lately, and I'm
Mhm.
definitely going through some iterations. It feels like a really tough detachment to play. It doesn't feel
Yeah.
like it's a straightforward one. So yeah, just open it up to you, and love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So basically, this actually started right before the detachment came out. I'd played a game with Montka
Hmm.
because I was trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to play next? Like, what am I taking to LVO? Like that sort of thing. I really didn't know. I played some games with Ret Cadre, and it really felt like the change from a 3-inch to a 6-inch deep strike. Um, it killed Melta,
Yeah.
which is what I used it for most of the time,
Hmm.
but it also really prevented me from pushing up the board as much as I was and like getting into places that my opponent didn't want. So that made me like it felt like I needed to go back to the drawing board and find a different play style than
Sure.
I'd had at the tournament that I went to at the beginning of December.
Hmm.
So I played a game with Montka, and after talking with like Cal Grundy and some of the people on the Pure Tide program about like how they play Montka and the best things in there, it appeared to me like two of the things that were really stood out to me in Montka were one, the focus fire stratagem for
Hmm.
plus one AP for 2 units
Yep.
that you could do for free if you targeted a war shaper with one of those.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
all right, and so
Hadn't
you
thought
can use
about
that
that.
every turn, no matter what you're doing. You're like, that's cool. I like plus one AP, and I think in Montcon there's no range requirement, so
No,
that worked really well,
there isn't.
right? And then the other thing is the strategic conquer enhancement in Montcon, which is at the beginning of the game, pick a objective, and all your units get plus one OC there.
Yeah.
And so I'd played a game with that where I was like, okay, these dogs are going to go out and take your objective. I'm like, this is really cool. And like, I'm using this for plus one AP. Like, oh man, that's really great. And then everything else in Montcalm was just like stupid. Like, didn't help at all. Like,
Hmm.
the salt never came up because I never really needed to move that far
Hmm.
on the layout that we have. I think I was playing on layout one or GW layout one, which is the first day of LVO.
Yep.
And the lethal hits, either I was forgetting them, which was that's bad for me, but or it just like really didn't help that much.
Uh-huh.
I wasn't too impressed with the rest of the package from Monka.
Sure.
Um, and then when Oxhydra came out, I was like, well, the two best things from Monka were plus one IP and plus one OC. I'm like, well, I can do that way better with Ox Cadre.
Hmm.
So my first iteration with Ox Cadre was, I think so I went to an RTT the day it came out.
No way.
Um,
And they let you play
yeah,
it?
yeah. So earlier
No
that
way.
month, I had talked with
You
the
asked
TO of the,
specifically? Yeah.
yeah, and I was like, hey, you should allow all of the detachments because that's what's fun and it's an RTT. People just want to have fun. And he's
Yeah.
like, sure, cool, that's all right. And we'll even use the day of. And
Sick.
then it turned out that Tau was the one day of. And I'd gotten up at like 4 a.m. to find out what it was.
That's
I
awesome.
woke up and I read the detachment. I'm like, oh no, this is awful. I'm just garbage. I
Yeah.
fell back asleep. And I woke up like half an hour later and reread interlocking maneuvers. And I was like,
Uh-huh.
wait a second,
Yeah, this is awesome.
this is really good.
Yeah, sure.
Um, and so I'd taken it to this RTT, and I should see if I know what my list was there. So I know I had 6 rampagers in that list because I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, they get pretty cool in this. And unfortunately, at the event, I thought that I could deep strike the rampagers using
Oh,
the
yes.
enhancement.
Oh, man, that'd be so awesome, wouldn't it?
That would have been really good.
Oh, man.
Unfortunately, not the case. And
Yeah.
so that meant that a 6-man rampagers, and I had like the lone spear for the support there.
Sure.
It was good in a couple matches.
Hmm.
it was good against Green Tide
Oh boy.
because he had to really respect that unit there.
Sure.
But in the end, it was really difficult to move that unit around and use it correctly in each match. And there was a lot of matches where like you just didn't need the whole 6, and it was just way too much into this one unit that you just had to pour CP into to make it worth it, because it was already 190 points plus the 100 for the Lone Spear, and you're like, yeah. So I'd done that, and all right, here's.
Can you hear the dog barking in the background, by the way?
Nope, not at all.
Okay, perfect. All right.
The other thing was in my list that at the first RTT was I'd basically just taken my Ret Cadre list, and took out a couple, like 1 or 2 Crisis Suit units and added in the Recruit Rampagers and whatnot. And so, I found that I didn't really like the Crisis Suits either, because they were, like the Star Scythe and the Sunforge were, even the Plasma was a little too short range, and they were really fragile. Because I didn't have Torchar Gambit, I couldn't get behind cover and hide again. So I needed something that was more durable. And that's where I then landed on the list that I then played for the GT that I went to. So let's see, I'll pull that up.
Awesome. Yeah, I got it in front of me, so.
Cool. Yeah, I do too. All right, so there's a couple things that I'd noticed in my games. Where one is that all the stratagems are really good, and kind of like in the Montka detachment. I remember playing that one, and one of the things that I had to do with Montka was like always use the strat for reroll all hits, because that's just like such a good strat.
So good. Yeah.
I'm like, gotta remember to use that one. And after a couple of games of Ox Cadre, I realized that's the same thing for interlocking maneuvers. If you realize, that CP that you get on your opponent's turn, if you realize that they're going to touch you at all, you save your CP for interlocking maneuvers, and it's gold.
Yeah.
So I saw that, and I was like, okay, I need more CP. I need to be able to use that along with these other great strats, plus 1 AP for Crute units, all these things. So that's why I've got Shadowsun and an Ethereal. And that's, I'll kind of come back to that as like things that we might change in the list, but that's where those came in. Nice. The other 2 characters that I've got are Coldstar Commander with Missile Pods, High Output, and Cyclic, and the Firesight team with Admired Leader. The Coldstar Commander goes with the Fire Knife team with Missile Pods. They're really good for that, long range firepower that can get into good angles and provide the volume that the rest of the list kind of doesn't have. The Firesight team is it's actually, that came from a couple iterations where I didn't have it and I was missing out on spotters. The rest of the list is actually really light on spotters. It's got a Pathfinder team and 2 stealth suits, and I was struggling to get ignore cover. And the Firesight team did 2 things for me. One, it gave me another marker light, and it gave me another lone op. And I was finding that definitely on the day 2 of LVO, where we're on GW layout 6, the extra lone op was super useful, because there's like, you've got 2 big lanes down the board edges, and there's also like not a lot of place to hide at the center either. And having that 3rd lone op to then give lone op to all my auxiliary units is just, it's amazing. It makes that setup really easy.
I was curious how you used them. I've played one game with the Firesight with enhancement for extra OC, and I found it to be just like a lot of the lists, like difficult to position him in a way where, okay, I'm getting value out of the extra OC, but I'm keeping him far enough away where my opponent can't just clip him for free. So I'm curious, kind of how you managed that. Is that something like you moved him, you started him like maybe in that, I know on layout 6, kind of the back of your deployment zone is fairly open, outside of those 2 runes, that 1 staging rune in the middle. Like, I'm curious, like, where you kind of positioned him, and I don't know, how you kind of thought about that.
On layout 1, he's going in, like, closest to your own board edge. by your home objective. So you've got like these two layouts here, and then like down there. I
Yep.
stick him down there,
Sure.
and then like rampagers will scout into like next to him.
Yeah.
So
gotcha.
then he's keeping them safe.
Sure.
On layout 6, he's like right in the center, and kind of giving you that he's the spotter that looks into the center objective. So he's kind of hanging out like near your home objective, maybe not quite there, but whatever it is that he's going to be outside of shooting range from your opponent, but still being able to sight down there.
Gotcha.
And then that usually gives the 12-inch bubble of admired leader a place to choose.
Nice.
But that's definitely one of the things that you have to get a lot of reps in with the list to remember to set that up. So you're doing your movements, and you're like, okay, I got to make sure that this guy, this Vespid or this Hound is within 6 of this guy at the end of the movement, and it's like one more thing you have to remember, which makes it difficult.
There are so many layers, and add spotting into that, which is already kind of a complicated mechanic, and it starts getting, kind of crazy.
Yep. So then going on through the rest of the list, 2 10-man crew carnivores. Those are, early game, they're sticking an objective, maybe securing my expansion objective, and then late game, they're usually my late game AP and screen, and throwing them out. Pathfinders for that double spotting. I try to keep them relatively safe because of their spotting. I really try to use that. 2 stealth teams. I'll get back to they're kind of hard to use. I'll talk about that. 3 Vespid Stingwings, and I landed on the Vespid because when I started playing, I had the Lone Spear, and I'm like, oh man, Fruit Hounds are amazing. For 40 points, this is amazing, and because I've got the character. As soon as I was like, I don't want to invest in that character, the Hounds then lost a lot of their value, because in order to make the Hounds 40 points really worth it, you want them base OC1, so they have to be within 12 of a character. So you need to bring in a character, and that gives you more of a tax, and suddenly they're not 40 points.
Sure.
And so I think Vespid are better, because not only do they have the same, movement as the Hounds, they also fly, and they have some amount of armor, which surprisingly saves them sometimes.
That's not been my experience. Ladies and gentlemen, don't expect Vespid to be tough, but...
No, they're not, but it's like if you only shoot, like, I played against Imperial Knights, and if they only shoot stubbers into them, they might live. And you're like, oh, wow, that was surprising. I guess you don't get that secondary or whatever.
Yeah. Plus the ability also is just like uber value. Like if they only kill like 3 of them, it's just money. It's like, oh, amazing. There's only 2 models now in this unit. Like, try screening that out.
Yeah. That's actually been one of the things that I've been like training myself out of is when I'm playing in other detachments, I have to I very easily use the Vespid. You put them in your backfield, you screen out your backfield, and then you pick them up at the end of your opponent's turn, and if there's nothing for them to do, they go back and screen your backfield. I'm like, this is great.
Sure.
But in Ox Cadre, it's actually, you have to plan out your next turn, and that often means putting them like right on the front lines, in your ruin where the Hounds were, so that the next turn they can just move 12 or 18 inches out, and go someplace that they wouldn't be able to deep strike.
Sure.
So I'm using them more for their speed on the battlefield than I am for their uppy downy in most games. Though, like early game, I'll definitely be picking up one of them and leaving 2 of them on the board, so that then if there is some place they could go, that's handy. And it certainly has worked out in my game against Imperial Knights. Not at this tournament, but in another place. They were able to get into the backfield and do like behind enemy lines and deploy homers. I'm like, good job, guys.
Yeah, love it.
And then continuing on the list, 2 3-man rampagers. They've been I'm really happy with them. One thing with this list is, and this is coming from my point of view as a person that's pretty much only played Tau for the past like 2 or 3 years, is it's fun to have some melee.
Yeah,
and
it is.
And the rampagers are good for that. Like, I don't expect them to do a lot of work, but then it's fun when they pop off, where they're like, oh, 5 mortal wounds. I did this in a practice game against Tyranids, he had 2 lictors standing next to each other.
Oh no.
And I'm like, oh no, lictors, they have fight first, and they probably kill like a rampager in combat, and then they're not going to die in return.
Yeah.
Well, I got first turn, and my rampager's like, scout up, move another 7, shoot the front lictor, and do a wound to him, charge him, do 5 mortal wounds, which was just amazing, and then pile into the other one and kill the other one and kill him. And
gross.
We realized like at the end of the game that he should have heroic the other lictor in, and then that would have like ruined their day. But it was pretty fun. In any case, the rampagers, I'm generally deploying them both. I don't usually reserve much in this list, but I deploy them both on the sides of the board, and they're going to move up with one of my lone ops and just provide another. Like they're usually like another layer of either +1 AP, along with that OC denial and a screening unit. In my third round where I played into Grey Knights, they eviscerate Grey Knights when you give them that plus AP. Because
a lot of attacks at AP 2 for 2.
Yeah, it's like 12 attacks at 622. And you've already done some mortals on the charge, like they punch up, and they're a ton of fun. So
I'm curious.
Really enjoyed them.
Yeah, they are super fun. I'm curious, like how often do you find yourself investing like CP into Rampagers?
Usually my first when I'm like looking at my turn and the CP that I'm spending, my first so over the full round, the first thing that I'm looking at is do I want to ditch one of my secondaries? That's one of the most important things because I want to make sure that I'm along with trying to deny their primary. Sometimes that's not possible because they're like knights or whatever. Then you want to just get a leg up on secondaries, and you have so many units, it's really easy to do that. But sometimes you draw a dead one, like bring it down on turn 1, and you're like, ugh. So that's number 1. Number 2 is often interlocking maneuvers. And then after that, it's kind of a, like, what do I need to do for the turn to do my secondaries or to kill a valuable target or to gain board presence where I need to. And it's between, like, do I need the plus strength for shooting? Do I need the plus AP on rampagers? Or sometimes reroll wounds, though I find the plus AP is usually the better of the two. And also the reroll ones to wound for ranged attacks is also pretty useful, which I can get into in some of my other games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Continuing on, Crew Hounds, they're usually like my first screen, because they just move so fast, and usually somebody puts like a rhino on a point, and I'm like, all right, here's 2 hounds. Now it's contested, and I've also screened you out from like moving past this building. Like, good job, dogs. And then they had to like expose to kill a 40-point unit. I'm like,
that's awesome.
Yes. I wish I could have more of them in the list. A pair of broadsides. I found that broadsides, they do really well in this list, in this detachment, because you can give them assault. And so some people are like, they can move 11. I'm like, yeah, they can move 11. They're never going to, but they could.
Nice to have that.
And the plus strength is really handy on them, just because it hits some nice break points. If you're like going into a monolith, winning on 3s instead of 4s is huge with them.
Yeah, big time.
The Fire Knife team, which I talked about, a Ghost Keel. The Ghost Keel, I think it's fine. It maintains its like it's just okay category of like it's a lone op that's kind of difficult to kill. And so it's providing another lone op bubble for more of my Ox. On layout 1, I always am using it to hold my expansion objective. And I would like to practice some without one, but I'm not going to for LVO.
Locked in.
Just like it's fine. 2 hammerheads with ion cannons. Those guys, in some matchups, they are like a dead weight. And I'm just like, why do I have this? And then in other matchups, they're just like clearing house. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Flat 3 damage is really good here.
Sure. Yeah, it feels like flat 3 damage is really important in this meta between like all the Gravis Marines we're seeing, like Possessed in the CSM list. It just seems like damage 3 is pretty king.
Yeah. They're also that strength 8 on the ion cannon is a perfect breakpoint for the stratagem to increase it to strength 10. Is really nice. And the +1 to hit against vehicles is actually really useful in this meta as well, because there's a lot of vehicle heavy lists. And that helps a lot. I've even had places where I didn't have a spotter, but hey, these guys are still hitting on 3s.
Yeah. So
and yeah, so that worked pretty well.
Nice.
Lastly is the Skyray gunship. This is another unit that's kind of on the like ghost keel of like, it's fine. It would have been a hammerhead, but I don't have 5 points. On the other hand, getting those missiles to AP4 is pretty tasty.
That's pretty sweet.
And it's a reliable, like, over the course of the game, it's going to do work. But at just 3 shots, it's like, it might wound once and you might do 4 or 5 damage, right? You're like, it's okay.
Sure.
Whereas with the hammerhead gunships, like turn 2 when they first get to go, not only are they firing their big cannon, and you might roll a 6, and then you're like, here's 9 shots at strength 10, AP 3 for 3, and their Vindicator's like, oh no! But you also have 2 missiles, so like out of the gate, the hammerhead is a lot better than the Skyray.
Sure.
I did have the Skyray pick up a Gargoyle Squad on its own, because it just gets full reels to hit, and that's pretty handy.
Yeah,
but
that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
I will say, I've run like a similar shooting castle with like basically the addition of like a Sunforge unit, minus a Skyray, and I think to your point of like starting units on the board, I feel like you have like a good damage presence to credibly kill. Like, okay, they put something like decently tough out on the table, like at least the Skyray adds to the critical mass of firepower, let's say, and it also doesn't need the strength buff to be, decently, a decent threat at least, to do something.
That's a really good point. Like both the Skyray and the broadsides fill that niche of not needing any strat support to be good.
Sure.
And the Skyray actually partners well with Commander Shadowsun in not needing a stealth suit unit to spot.
Yeah,
so coming back to those stealth suits, one of the things that I'm like trying to figure out the right setup is who's spotting for who.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that I kind of figured out as I was playing through this GT. Having one of the stealth suits spot for the broadsides, like that's a no-brainer.
Given.
The other one usually spotting for a hammerhead. And then I found in my game, I think it was the last round of the GT into Space Wolves. I'm like going into a real go turn where I have to like screen and kill like this big Thunderwolf Cav unit, and I'm like thinking through all my stratagems, and then I remembered, I can give my Fire Knife team reroll ones to wound with the stratagem, and then I don't have to spot with. I can spot with the Pathfinders, and you've got full rerolls to hit and reroll ones to wound, and that combination, and then my opponent unfortunately failing 9 out of 11 saves, meant like the missile pods from the crisis suits killed 4.5 dogs, and I'm like, okay,
heinous.
Yeah, it man. Really was. It really was game defining right there.
Sure.
But yeah. So that was kind of one of the things, like trying to figure out the spotting setup.
And then you mentioned you were thinking about like potential changes to the list. So it sounds like Ghostkeel and Skyray kind of up in the air, but you also mentioned Shadowsun and the Ethereal. So just curious, like your thoughts on what edits you might, or different iterations you might try out.
Yeah. You'd mentioned Sunforge, and I'd played a game with Sunforge at one point, and I think that especially like either with a Coldstar or with Firesight, they're a fine addition to the army because you can give them +2 strength, strength 11. That's
It's
better
really,
than they can be in Ret Cadre.
it's
Like
massive.
it's good.
It's a good breakpoint. Yeah.
And much easier access to the +1 AP, so they're AP 5.
Yeah.
They're strong. I felt like they're though often because you don't have a Torchstar Gambit, they're a 1 and then they're probably done.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of death in the meta right now that can just take out even with the 4-up invuln, you're only T5, so a lot of people are wounding you on 2s. And you'll often get through like a shooting or fight phase and you'll have like Farsight and one guy on like 1 wound.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, okay, what are we doing? And maybe he can get out of it with interlocking maneuvers.
Yeah.
But like it was a lot to put into that. So
sure.
That's where I feel like the shooting castle that I have in this list plays the longer game better. And the game where you're trying to keep them at arm's length with your auxiliaries and not get up close.
Sure.
Whereas the Sunforge wants to get close. So in any case, one change that I was looking at is like, okay, I could drop the Ethereal and the Skyray, and like something else, and you could bring in Sunforge with Farsight, something along those lines. Or like dropping the Ghost Keel as well, and then you bring in something else. It's an okay thing. But yeah, like the Ethereal. Oh, another thought I had was you could drop the Ethereal and the Skyray for another pair of broadsides. Because I really felt like the broadsides, they're just always doing really well.
Yeah.
Probably about as well as the Skyray, honestly. Because the Skyray gets twin linked, but the broadsides have dev wounds and they have more shots with their missile pods. So it's like,
yeah, the 8 missile pod shots really help because it allows them to be like, more than just an anti-tank piece, right? They can actually reliably kill some other types of units. They're good into some other profiles. I've struggled with them personally because the layouts that we play on, it has like a little bit extra terrain than GW, so the firing angles are a little bit more constrained, which makes them a little bit more difficult to like put a couple out there, but I can definitely see a second broadside unit being a good addition. I think to your point, the strength of Ox Cadre in part is that you can get AP without having to get your like squishy damage pieces into your opponent's face.
Yeah. Yep. So being able to have those long range guns that then makes it difficult for your opponent to get back at you. So like at my game against Space Wolves, and so I'll start up. I ended up going first, which was like, okay, this is good, so I can keep him back. And because we were on layout 6 rather, day 2, he couldn't deploy all his wolves in a place where he couldn't get shot. So I'd set up in a place where I could pop over and shoot broadsides and 2 hammerheads into him. But then I screwed up and didn't set up enough spotters. So 1 hammerhead and the broadsides got spotting, and then the 3rd hammerhead was just like, I'm gonna shoot a gun, and that hammerhead did nothing. It just missed and failed to wound, and I'm like,
man.
Suck. And then the Vindicator was like, I'm gonna roll out, and I'm just within 24 of that 1 hammerhead that did nothing and killed it. But like, if I hadn't had that hammerhead out, he wouldn't have been able to shoot back at me with the Vindicator because range and like I had a screen. I'd set up so that I had some Vespid out there so that even if he charges the Vespid, he's not piling into me. He can't move past the Vespid to then charge Shadowsun or whatever. So that keeping somebody at range is really helpful.
Yeah. Absolutely. Tell me more about your. Oh, you were going to say something. Go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch a little bit more on the Ethereal.
Yeah.
So I still haven't. I don't have definitive like. I should have written down like when he was giving me CP and like how useful that was.
Sure.
It's so swingy. The 4-up, it feels like I've had some games where it's just like he only rolls 1s.
Yeah.
Like
it's like this really stinks.
But then there's games where it's like you get that CP and there's so many good uses of it, and sometimes that use like popped off and that was the turn, that was the game because you had that extra CP.
Sure.
So he's just like,
it's so nice
I don't know.
Getting that at the beginning of the turn. As opposed to banking it at the end of the turn, like, okay, now you have 2 CP in your turn 1, right? And then you could, like you mentioned before about how important it is to redraw secondaries, then you feel super comfortable just being like, all right, we're gonna burn this because we're getting the extra CP already, like ahead of time. Because like if you have one scoreable secondary, one not scoreable secondary, and you say, okay, I'm gonna burn a CP. Like if you get another scoreable secondary, you're not gonna rebank that CP at the end of the turn from ditching.
Right.
So having
Right.
that kind of stopgap to say like, okay, I can take the risk here. But I hear you loud and clear. I've run one ethereal to be the Scout 6 caddy in Monka before, and yeah, it's a 4-up,
Yeah.
It's just a
Yep.
4-up.
I will say he's definitely staying in the list because I found it was really helpful to have him be a backfield screening piece.
Sure.
Because
of the fat
in all
base.
my games.
Yeah.
That base, and I'm just like, he can be in the back. Oftentimes the Pathfinders were screening out the rest of my deployment zone because I didn't want them up early game, and then that let all my auxiliaries be forward because I was using those Vespid in the early turns to do more than just screen my backfield.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, tell me a little bit more about like your run. I saw that your closest game was round 1 actually.
Oh yeah.
I'd love to hear about it. Because I had gotten a rep. That's Slaanesh, right?
Yeah.
And, man, I got a rep into Slaanesh. I played Kalyan. I was just messing around with it because I didn't have the models. Don't play Kalyan into Slaanesh. It's terrible. It's exactly what you'd think it would be like. It's horrific. I did not have enough screens.
No. So this was hilarious because the night before in Discord, what was it that was said? It was basically round 1 was gonna be Nick Fromy versus me, and then that's actually what happened. There was no like collusion. Where can I find it? Where was that?
And he's like one of the top players in the area, correct? I feel like I've heard the name before.
Oh yeah, he is.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the TO Bailey had posted in one of our Discords. Drop in at 10 a.m. to see round 1. Fromy is wanting some Donald Plummer action at some point this weekend, and I immediately responded, I thought you were announcing myself versus Fromy round 1, and then that's what happened.
Oh my gosh.
It was hilarious. When we saw that we were paired, we were just like, this is awesome.
Oh, that's so cool.
He's one of the ringers on our the team that I'm on, Team Aegis.
Yeah.
He's in the Team USA. I don't know if it's the Academy.
Yes,
or
the Academy, I think that's called. Yep.
Yeah, he's in the Academy. He's an excellent player. He was definitely like both him as a player and that detachment was the biggest thing that I had to worry about the entire weekend. Like I knew that going in. I'm like, that detachment is cracked.
Yeah.
It's really scary.
It's cracked into Tau for sure. Gun lines.
It's really good into Tau.
Yep.
1, we don't get our detachment rule. 2, he gets full reels to hit and wound against us. So I'm
I forgot the extra AP just doesn't even matter.
Does not matter.
Yeah.
And
he's not shooting anything, so the lone up also doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, his guns are 18-inch range, like apart from the Soul Grinder.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So anyway, but like he and I just have such a great rapport that I'm just like, this is gonna be a fun game. We're gonna have a good time.
Absolutely.
So you can see that one on stream. It was streamed on Twitch.
No way.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'll get you the links for that. So you can put them in like
I will.
The description
I'll
on there.
Check it out myself.
Yeah. So we were playing on the Take and Hold round 1 of LVO, and I think I must have ended up going second because I was second for the first 4 rounds, and I went first on the last round, but went second, which was obviously a big deal because he basically couldn't expose anything without getting shot turn 1, and there wasn't really a lot of great places for him to stage. Like he could stage up in that center L that much, but like I can screen that. And that's basically what ended up happening. We went back and forth a bunch of times on like, he has funny strats, I have funny strats, and we remind each other of the funny strats.
Sure.
And then at one point, so the game ended, what was it like? There's a 6-point difference at the end.
Yeah, it was 71-65. Yep.
Yeah. And, so the things to think about with the excess, Legion of Excess detachment, they have 2 cracked stratagems. One is when you choose a target to shoot at, stratagem says roll a battle shock test at -1,
Mhm.
-2 if you're next to a keeper because the keeper has an aura of Shadow of Chaos,
Mhm.
and if you fail it, you can't shoot at that target. Got to shoot at somebody else.
It's so rough.
And that's pretty rough, but where it's super rough is if you've got a unit of broadsides in combat with fiends,
Oh,
and you're
no.
like, well, the broadsides are going to shoot the fiends, and then you're like, no, you can't.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, well, I guess these fiends are going to live this turn and fall back and charge somewhere else.
Oh my god.
And that's what happened at one point. The fiends fell back and then charged like a stealth team and the Firesight marksman, and like goodbye.
Yeah, see you later, spotters.
Yeah. So that's crazy. The other crazy strat that like we had to talk about a bunch just so I could really grok how it works is when a wound is allocated to a Slaanesh model that's not a monster, you can then pass that wound off to another unit within 12 inches, doesn't need line of sight.
Mm-hmm.
And Nick and the best Slaanesh player were both at this tournament, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul has been griping about this a lot because most people playing this detachment forget about that rider of you can't use it on monsters, and they're using it on keepers. Cannot use it on keepers.
Mm-hmm.
But
you can move it.
Unfortunately,
correct. Like you
can send the wounds to a keeper.
Yeah.
And then the keeper has to pipe up Feel No Pain versus Mortals, and you're like, oh, great.
Ugh.
So what Nick had in his list was Daemonettes with the Soul Mirror something or another that gives the whole unit a 4-up Feel No Pain versus Mortals.
Yeah.
And so you use the strat, and then you pass off the wounds to the Daemonettes, and then on a 4-up you don't even take a wound. Pretty nice.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, Games Workshop forgot about the Soul Grinder and the fact that the Soul Grinder is not a monster. You can use this strat on the Soul Grinder because it's a vehicle.
Oh.
And then you just like have an indestructible Soul Grinder until the end of the game when there's nothing else left, and then the Soul Grinder can die.
That is so silly.
So what happened towards the end of the game? It was definitely a game of like I'm trying to screen as much as I can, figure out like how much he should push and where he can push and like what he can get past my screens because nothing in his army flies. So like even if he wants to push hard, he's just going to hit my screens and not get that far. And then I've got another layer of screens. So it was really a nice back and forth there. But towards the end of the game, he had he'd drawn like Assassinate and Bring It Down. And he comes at my Coldstar commander with the missile pod unit with a chariot at full health.
Oh,
and I overwatch the chariot.
Stop it.
And I get the chariot down. He would have died, but he's down to 1 wound because I just hit pretty well with the fire knife unit. Get full reels to hits, pretty nice.
Sure.
And get the chariot down, and he's down to 1 wound, and he has like 1 save left. And he's like, well, I have to use my stratagem here, or else I lose the chariot, and then I don't hit the fire knife unit. So he uses the stratagem, passes the invuln save, so nothing happens anyway, because it's when you're allocated, so it's before you roll the save.
Sure.
So like, okay, whatever, we got past that.
Yeah.
And then the Soul Grinder, so then that got into combat, and then the Soul Grinder got into combat, and with the Ghost Keel, and chose the I'm not going to go first. You can go first, Mr. Ghost Keel.
No.
The Ghost Keel managed to wound the Soul Grinder.
Stop it.
And he failed to save. But took 2 damage from that. And then the chariot didn't kill the... Oh no, the chariot also chose the...
Yeah,
you can go first so I can get full reels to wound.
Yeah.
And I managed to wound with the Crisis team into the chariot, and he's like, well, I guess I have to use this stratagem. So he passed the wounds off to the Soul Grinder. Now the Soul Grinder's down to 3 because the Ghost Keel punched him.
Oh, man. That's
and then the chariot does its thing, doesn't end up killing the character, but I think he might have killed the Crisis team. And then the Soul Grinder kills the Ghost Keel. The Ghost Keel explodes and kills the Soul Grinder because of all these mortal wounds that the Soul Grinder was taking from the chariot. It was a fantastic turn of events.
Oh my gosh.
But so that was a really fun interaction with those crazy stratagems.
Yeah.
One of the defining moments of the game though was when he charged 6 fiends in to Pathfinders, I think it was, and then after killing all the Pathfinders, piled into Kroot and like a Hammerhead and something else, and that I was not thinking at the time, or else I would have mentioned like, oh hey, I can use interlocking maneuvers.
Sure.
But then like we got through a whole bunch of other things, and then it was like, oh, I can use interlocking maneuvers here, and he's like, oh, go for it, that's awesome. And I went and I took primary in the center of the board with that.
Oh my god!
So that was 5 points.
Yeah.
That
was
and you know. It was a 6-point game, but like that mistake that he made, he did not need to touch those Kroot. That mistake that he made then made it a 6-point instead of a 1-point game. And a 1-point game, as you know, is just like, did you draw the right secondaries or not?
Sure.
And so that was super close. And yeah, really good game there.
That's awesome.
But really happy to get through that at the start. Don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And then your other opponents, remind me what other armies you played into.
Yeah, so round 2, I was into the new Custodes detachment.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and this was a game that I don't recall if he didn't roll his 4-ups very well, but really, you look at the score sheet, and it comes down to the fact that he only got 3s on primary. We were playing on Linchpin.
Oh, yeah.
And I just have enough trash that's like high OC
sure.
that he's like, I've got 8 OC on this point. I'm like, cool, here's 10 with these Vespid.
Yeah. Anyways.
And
here's a 65-point unit.
Yeah, and he didn't have enough to deal with that. And ended up I think he might have conceded on like turn 4, and we just kind of talked it out. Like, okay, yeah, you could probably do this. I'm probably not doing anything to this, whatever unit it was. Sure. Stands back up. Okay, cool. You get area denial. All right.
Yeah.
It was that detachment. It's fun because you can go through walls, but like you don't fly. So I guess I'm gonna screen you really well.
Yeah,
and that
screen you so hard.
That's kind of what this detachment does. Is it plays the movement game. It plays the movement phase so well that a lot of people aren't used to that, and I don't know what you do to beat it. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, clearly. I will say there is a lot of, like, clearly you've learned a lot from playing something like Retaliation Cadre, because movement and positioning is, I think you're downplaying a little bit, but I think it's a pretty hard skill to learn. And after playing this army a few times, you talked about like kind of layering the screens, or like layering your units, right? When you pop out the Crude Hound unit, there's another unit that pops in to replace it. But just doing the exercise of deployment is kind of a difficult exercise when you're not used to having this many like physical models on the table. Like it's like 40 more models than normal.
Oh yeah, in I think 3 of my matches, I looked at, I counted up before we even got to the table. I'm like, okay, so you have 7 units to deploy. Cool. All right, here's my 7 units. Boom, done. Deploy your army, and then I'll place my actual army.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I have 19 units.
Sure, you're like, here's 3 units of Vespid, a Firesight Marksman, Crude Hounds, 2 Stealth Suit units, and okay, now I'm going to put all my damage exactly where it needs to be.
Exactly. And that is it's actually really strong. Yeah. Really, really nice. But it does take a little bit extra time to deploy everything, for sure.
It's something I feel like I should even just practice, just going like through the exercise of just like re-racking with friends or something like that. I think it would just be helpful. Oh man.
Getting the deploy down and then like pulling your first turn secondaries.
Sure.
To figure out like, oh, did I set up for the right secondaries? Am I in a place where I can do contain or area, or engage on all fronts, that sort of thing. Yeah.
One thing I'm curious about is, did you by chance play Purge at this GT?
Yes.
Okay, I'd love to hear about that game, because that seems like it seems like it'd be real rough for this list.
Yes. Yeah. I'll get into that in a second.
Cool.
So just kind of going down the rounds. Round 3, I played into one of the other. So 3 of my opponents here are like top 100 elos. Like Fromy, he's in like the top 50. My round 3, Joel, I think he's in the top 100.
Oh my gosh.
And I think my round 5, Cohen, he's also ranked really high.
Right.
So all really good players,
sure.
At least in the U.S., 100 in the U.S., whatever. Yeah. So Joel, he's playing the new Wartbane task force with Grey Knights, which I'm afraid of, because it just leaf blows stuff off the table.
Mm-hmm.
But he was playing a weird setup that was mostly infantry and had 2 land raiders and no dread knights.
Huh.
And it turns out that I brought all the guns to kill 2 up save marine
no
bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. Like, yeah, he's got a stratagem that can give an infantry unit 4 up invuln.
Mm.
And so I was like, okay, this is coincidentally AP3. Do you want a 4 up invuln? I was like, it's not really going to save me.
Sure.
Like, no, it's not. Oh, look, the burst cannons on my hammerheads are AP2. Like,
yeah.
suddenly really good.
Sure.
So this was a game where I was scared because he can like delete anything in my army that he wants to nearly, but actually he really can't, because like I've got these T10 holes that he's not very good into unless he's in melee, and I have screens for days, and Grey Knights doesn't like that, so that game didn't go too hot for him. Then we rolled into day 2, and that's where I played Purge. So round 1 was Purge, this would be round 4. Yeah. Same thing at LVO. We were just playing through the LVO missions.
Nice.
And at that point, I knew the other undefeateds were Imperial Knights and Space Wolves, and then myself. And so I actually got the pair down because the TO was pairing by placement, and I had not gotten as many victory points as my opponents, or as the other people that are undefeated. So I got the pair down into the top X and 1 player who was playing Adeptus Custodes, and this was a match that I really didn't want to see because it's 15 Wardens.
Oh my gosh. Ugh.
On Purge. And so he's got like 8 units, I think, because he had a Sisters Rhino and 2 Sisters units, and then like 2 guard squads. One of them had Kiradraxis, and then 3 Wardens with Blade Champs. That was the list.
This was the
but
this was the Sister Detachment where they have like the reactive move, or
no, he was playing Shield Host, so he had the crit 5s.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, all right. But I mean, I know from playing enough Custodes that, man, the 4 up invulns into 4 up Feel No Pains, this is going to be rough. And he's got 3 of them, so I'm going to have to deal with these like. He's probably going to do it correctly, and I'm only going to have to deal with 1 a turn, but I can't really deal with a whole 1 in 1 turn, and so I just have to like get the purge done correctly, and luckily I went second, which is really important.
Yeah.
On the other hand, neither one of us got a kill turn 1.
Okay.
Which was good, because then he didn't want to. There was obviously nothing for him to shoot at or charge into turn 1. And then I didn't have any targets back into him. I think he actually did step up onto an objective with bikes, and I shot the Skyray into the bikes, which is the only thing that I'd had set up to do that. Unfortunately, I didn't deploy correctly for that in this setup, and he CP re-rolled one of his saves on the bikes into a 4 up. And save that bike unit, or else I would have gotten that kill. So that was pretty good. The Skyray, pretty handy there. And then it was really a game of his secondaries were not as good as mine. So if you got the scorecard, we both scored 40 on primary. I think he got kill more at the end of the game. But I was getting, I think I actually got a kill more on round 3. And then I got a hold more at the end of the game, obviously, because I went second.
Sure.
But
how'd you pull off that kill more?
How did I pull off the kill more? This was one of the streamed games, because I was on the stream round 1, 4, and 5.
Oh, awesome.
I want to say I had. I think it was like I had 2 units to screen with, 2 or 3 screens that he ended up killing, and then I think I killed the bikes on Overwatch. Was that the turn that he was trying to get? He was trying to get engage on all fronts. No, that was turn 2. I killed the bikes on turn 2 because he was trying to get engage on all fronts with them. And we kind of talked through his stuff, because after round 1, he's just like hands and head,
really?
Like I can't possibly win this game.
Oh my god!
I'd like it was not looking good because he needed to come out, but in coming out, then I get to shoot him with my whole army.
Yeah.
He can't get secondaries because he doesn't have trash to put out there for secondaries, but it's also purge. It's like it's kind of a rough. He didn't quite know how to play the game, and so I'd be like, oh hey, this bike can easily get over here for the engage, and then when he went to do it, I was like, oh right, I can just Overwatch this with my Skyray and get full reels to hit. He's like, go for it, and
No.
I killed the bike on Overwatch.
Oh my god.
In any case, so I think on round 3, I'd ended up killing, like round 2, I'd killed some of a Warden squad, and then round 3, I finished off the Warden squad and the Blade Champ.
Gotcha.
So that's 2 kills.
Oh yeah.
Killed a sister unit, and I think I might have killed like a guard unit as well.
Very nice.
So I'd gotten 4 kills to his 3 on that round.
Awesome.
But the game was really one of being very careful about like keeping back with all my guns and then scoring my secondaries. And just winning on the secondary game because I knew the primary game was going to be rough.
Sure.
Yeah.
Very cool. And then the final round.
The final round, yeah. So this was into the Space Wolves. And this was one that I'm glad I didn't play that on Purge. Because he has like, he again had like 7 drops. It was like the 3 big wolf, 6 thunder wolves plus 2 characters. He had 2 vindicators. He had 2 scout squads. What else was there? Was there even anything else?
Maybe a Custodes, maybe an infiltrator. Nothing? None of the above?
No.
Huh.
Let's see, I can pull this up. This was Cohen, and of course Logan Grimnar for the wall.
Sure.
And an Invader ATV.
Gotcha.
And
yeah, that is
in
lean.
3 scout squads.
3 scout squads.
Very, very lean.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, this was the game where I luckily I went first. I got some shots into Thunderwolf that didn't really do anything, and then you'll see in the video. I think I can get into round 2, and like round 1, I'd screened a whole bunch, killed the screen, and now he's in front of me with 2 wolf squads. I can shoot at either one, but whichever one I shoot at, then they get to come forward. So I have to set up, okay, if I want to screen one of these, I have to be either 7 inches away, and then I can shoot it, or 1 inch away, and I can't shoot it. And that's what I ended up doing. I ended up screening one of them 1 inch away, I think the one in the center, and then the one that was on the towards my edge of the table, I had near his expansion, I screened at 7 inches, and then, I screened it at 5 inches.
Oh, interesting.
But I had the Rampagers right there, and the screen was a ghost keel. So, if he ends up making the 5-inch D6 roll, he gets into combat with the ghost keel. He has to stay out of engagement range of the Rampagers because the ghost keel is a 1/4 inch closer, and of the character that's in front. So I know the character is going to be the one to be closer. He can't like pull something weird and then now he's into the Rampagers.
Sure.
And then I get to charge in with the Rampagers. Now the Rampagers are not going to kill like more than 1, maybe 2 if I'm lucky.
Yeah.
But they're going to time up in combat. It takes like 9 wounds to go through to kill one of them, which is most of their attacks. And so then they're kind of stuck in combat there.
Yeah. And
anyway,
they don't get that bonus where they get the extra damage either if they end an engagement. Is that how that works?
No, I guess they wouldn't.
Yeah. So that,
it never ended up happening, but I never thought of that.
Yeah, so
it's not a charge move.
Yeah, you could really just stick him there.
Oh yeah, that's really good. Okay. But yeah, it ended up happening that he'd rolled the D6 and he didn't end up getting it, so I think he didn't roll well and didn't end up moving. And then I think I failed to charge with the Rampagers too, or something like that. But like at that point, it was like he had Thunderwolves in the middle and like that squad, and I'd screen the Thunderwolves in the middle. So then the next turn, he comes up with the Thunderwolves in the middle, and I'm like, well, I gotta kill these guys in the middle, and the Fire Knife team like killed the entire Thunderwolf unit. to start with, and I'm like, okay, so I got 2 hammerheads, a ghost keel, and a Skyray
hanging
just
out.
like, what do we do? Thanks, guys. It was epic.
That's awesome.
And that was that, like, using the reroll ones to wound strat really helped me there. Just that volume, like, it really converted.
So it sounds like you kind of you played quite a few different archetypes there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a really tanky Custodes list, like a generically tough Custodes list, an aggro list with the what is the name of the Slaanesh detachment?
Legion of Excess.
Legion of Excess, yeah. And then the final one, another aggro detachment. So I'm curious, like, when you take a step back and you kind of think about, like, matchups, I don't know how much this influences, like, your list building, but I'm curious which matchups you look at and you say, okay, that's a matchup I would really, really like to avoid. And then, are there any matchups that are like that where you're thinking, okay, this is a tough matchup for my army, but there are some pieces that I can include in it that might change it enough to be worth it, right? Or that army might be prevalent enough in the top tables that you might adjust. I don't know if I'm explaining that question well enough, but
no, it's a good question.
Yeah.
It's certainly something that I think about. Definitely think about like the Star Shatter. I didn't have to go into that this weekend. I think there only like maybe there was one person at the place playing that.
Yeah.
I played into it in practice games, and I know that it's a difficult match just because they shoot well.
Yeah.
And they can, I think their strat lets them go through models.
Oh yeah. No, not through models, just through walls.
Just through walls. No. Oh, but it's once you shoot them, then they get to move.
Exactly.
And I don't like that.
Yeah, it's so not good for Tau. It's like you really are hoping broadsides connect, and they don't. They don't hit their 4-ups. And the Silent King's near unkillable, it feels like, in that detachment.
Yep.
With the -1 damage.
Yep. Yep. So that's one where I'm just like, the Skyray is nice because you get full reels to hit against not the Silent King.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't fly for whatever reason.
Interesting. Even though he's literally like levitating on his throne. Still is.
Yep. So he's really good there. And then obviously the Hammerheads getting +1 to hit.
Yeah.
They're also there, and then you can give them the +2 strength, so that then your opponent probably is going to do the -1 to wound, but at least you're winning on 4s and not 5s.
Yeah, exactly.
That's. But the thing that Starcatter struggles with is holding primary. And in one of my practice games against Star Shatter, we were playing on the ritual, and round 2, I yeeted my carnivores 13 inches, gave them advance and charged into flayed ones, killed all the flayed ones.
Stop.
Like, cool.
Hell yeah.
But if I consolidate, I have to touch the Silent King, and that would just kill all of the my carnivores. So interlocking maneuvers goes, and they all walk to this point. I'm like 30 OC.
Oh my gosh,
and
that's awesome.
No primary on turn 2.
Oh,
right. So
nasty.
That's you have to engineer that sort of thing. And one of the problems with the Star Shatter detachment is they have very few units that can heroically intervene. Right, like. The vehicles, none of the vehicles can. Well, no, the Triarch Stalker can. It's a walker.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But it is only going to kill like 3 or 4 carnivores in combat.
Yeah.
So if you charge into a Doomsday Arc and then they heroic with the Triarch Stalker, you're still going to have like 18 OC and be like, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool.
So it's a winnable match for sure.
Yeah.
And then other considerations I have, the ethereal. Okay, so this is why the admired leader is on the Firesight team and not the ethereal. Is all of those matchups where they have indirect, so like Chaos Knights, or Guard, or another Tau unit with indirect. If I need to have my ethereal off the board, so I'm getting CP, I don't want to lose out on that buff. And even into Star Shatter, because the Silent King has indirect.
Yep.
I like in that game, you either start the stealth teams like in the corners so that he can't move and indirect the stealth teams, or maybe even off the board if that like is a worry. And then like all he has to indirect are like P10 tanks, and he's like, "Well, this kind of sucks." And like, yeah, 18-inch load up.
Yeah, it is kind of nice, huh?
Yeah. So that's definitely why I have the admired leader on the Firesight team.
That's a great point.
Yeah, other matchups that I'm worried about, the Legion of Excess. I think that one is, it's a really hard match. I would not, I'd put that probably at like a 60-40 or better for the Legion of Excess player.
Sure. Yeah.
It's really rough for Tau. Like you have to screen really well, and then hope that you actually kill one of the keepers when you shoot at it.
Yeah.
Because they have a 4-up, 5-up, 4-up invuln, 5-up feeling pain, and 18 wounds.
Yeah.
And I got lucky on the turns that I shot, and was like, oh, failed those invuln saves. I'm like, okay,
thank goodness.
Kill one of them.
Plus, there's the added layer of, you might have to take a leadership test to even be able to shoot them, and then all of a sudden it gets real spooky, right? If your broadsides aren't shooting them. And I think
that's exactly right.
They are T10 at least, so like your hammerheads, like you could get them to being like borderline, effective into them, but still, could be.
They're also always -1 to be hit.
Yeah.
So having the weapons support system on the broadsides is super important there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with how much the broadsides were in combat, and then trying to shoot out of combat, it was very helpful there too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Other matchups that I'm worried about, I have not played into Gene Stealer cults. I don't have any practice partners or know anybody that plays it, so that's been. I hope I just don't play it at LVO because I don't know. Like, I assume that the gameplay is similar to previous Gene Stealer cults, where it's just like I try to get as much board presence before they take all the board presence, and I try to kill them. And maybe you take fixed against them, like Cull Assassinate, because you're getting CP from the Ethereal.
Sure.
That's another reason that I feel like maybe keeping the Ethereal is a good play.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because if they're just taking the 20 mans plus the characters, that's the whole game. Yeah, I think that's a great point.
It's it's a choice you got to make when you get to the table and see what their list is.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've never taken fixed in 10th edition, so
not one time.
Hopefully I don't have to. Not one time. No.
Oh my gosh. You were playing Tau at the beginning of the edition when it was everyone taking fixed.
No. Before the point drop for Tau, I never played it.
Yeah.
Oh no, I take that back. I did. I played a GT before the point drop, and I had a Tiger Shark. Yeah.
I look back on like the first GT I ever played in. It was like 2 Ghost Keels, 3 Skyrays, like 6. Like I think I had 12 Crisis Suits and 3 Commanders. It gave up in like 3 sets of Tetras. I think it gave up like 44 and Bring It Down, and everyone was just pressing the button every single game. They're like, Homers, Bring It Down every single game. Somehow still managed to pull it forward too, but I just like look back at that list. I'm like, this is complete silliness that I was giving up 46 on Bring It Down. Just so silly.
Yeah. Interestingly, this list only gives up 16 on Bring It Down.
Very nice.
Yeah. And 4 characters. So 4 characters, I guess, would be the max. But
you could play Keep Away pretty well, though. Like, especially with the fire.
I don't need to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never. I think I lost. I lost the Firesight team in my game against Slaanesh. I want to say I've lost Shadowsun in one of the games, but I don't remember. And the Coldstar, I don't think has died. Well, maybe he died against Imperial Knights. But it's that was a weird game. So against Imperial Knights, he was playing all. This wasn't at the GT practice game.
Gotcha.
He was playing all Warglaive and Helmrunes. He didn't have any big knights. Very good player though, so I'm worried about this.
Sure.
But that also means that the missile pod unit is like less than useless. Like, what are they going to do? They are staying in deep strike, and then on turn 3, they deep struck into his backfield because he didn't have enough units to screen back there, and he had some sisters in his list, and so the Coldstar was just like, I'm going to shoot just put this entire Fire Knife team into 4 poor sisters on a point.
Did you roll that out? Did you roll that out?
We did, because he had cover and
Oh,
only
come
AP one.
Okay.
No, it was AP
AP
two because I had a
Oh, it was
lone
AP
Vespid.
Oh my gosh.
Because he'd shot the Vespid the previous turn with Hellbrinds,
Yeah.
but didn't kill the unit because I had a 4-up save.
Uh-huh.
And so then that one Vespid was just like, I'm gonna give you plus AP.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
So that, yeah.
But you were saying
yeah,
matchup, yeah.
yeah. So in general, that's another matchup that's just it's difficult, and it's definitely a game of screening and trying to carve out like one part of the board so then you can focus on that part of the board and then go to the next part of the board.
Yeah.
And that's often how I was feeling about the games was, like focus on one flank with all my guns, and screen hard on the other flank while I'm like doing that. Actually, it's basically the same screening, but when I'm measuring out like where they're going to be the next turn, I'm like, I'm going to delete these units because I'm going to put enough firepower under them that's going to happen.
Yep.
I'm not going to touch this Telemon or whatever over here, so he's going to do whatever he does over there.
Yep.
And then I just like accept that and like figure out where he can go and be like, okay, he's killing the dogs.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, exactly. He's not going to hit anything that matters.
Yeah.
That's a really important, like, I feel like it's, maybe for you it's like a simple thing, but I think for like the average player, thinking about like, okay, these are the things that I'm going to kill, and these are the things I'm going to move block or screen or just throw the absolute minimum to like stop my opponent's momentum on that side of the board. Like that is a really important thing for like, playing better 40k, let's say. So anyways,
Yeah.
it's a good reminder for me.
It's a very different play style than the Retaliation Cadre that I had before the Battle of Data Slate. That was a like all aggro. I'm just going to kill my opponent. This list is a what's the word? I'm gonna lose. I'm gonna lose units every turn.
Yeah.
An army.
Sure.
Right. Like by the end of the game, I do not expect to have any auxiliary units left, which is kind of annoying because then I don't get my plus AP. But if I have played the game right, then my opponent also got very little primary, and they didn't get past the middle of the board. That's another thing in this list. Unlike Retaliation Cadre, I am not really trying to get onto their side of the board. I'm like, this is my half of the board. I'm going to score my secondaries over here. Maybe I'll throw some Ox units into your side of the board. They'll die. I don't care to get some more secondaries. But like, this is me. You stay over there.
Yeah.
And it's a different play style than Ret Cadre, which is like, I want to be over there now because I can.
Yeah, it feels like a complete departure from like the skill set I've built as a Tau player. Like to a certain degree, like Kalyan had like a little bit of a flavor of this, where you're kind of holding on for dear life a little bit, or at least like I feel like that's where I learned the skill of move blocking. But this is to your point, like after playing Retaliation Cadre for a while, it feels like a completely different army, which is pretty cool. Like I'm grateful for GW for giving us like a new way to play Tau. And I kind of, when I looked at the detachment myself for a second, I was like, oh man, like I really would have loved if this was like +1 to hit for vehicles, or or like Borkan, like give me some extra range or something, like if I could get an extra 6-inch range on like Meltas, like
Yeah, definitely. When I first read it, I was just like, oh no. And I went back to bed, and then I woke up, and then like the more that I'd read it, I was like, the more this is good. And then the more I played it, I'm like, this is really good.
Yeah.
And the fact that the only limitations on anything is like, is it Ox Cadre or is it not Ox Cadre? And then everything else is fair game.
Sure.
And that feels so good from a like list building perspective.
Exactly.
You can go and be like, okay, do I want the long range of the Skyray? Do I want the short range of the Sunforge? Do I need the lone op of the Ghost Keel, or do I want the +1 to hit from the Hammerhead? Like, these are interesting trade-offs. One unit I haven't mentioned, and I guess I'll briefly cover it, is the Riptide. And I think the Riptide probably has a place in this. I have not been playing the Riptide since I'd switched to Ret Cadre, and I think it's fine. It's at the same place where it's like, oh yeah, you can give it +2 strength and not strength 10, and that's cool. And it's flat 4, which is a lot better than everything else.
Sure.
And it's probably good in a like, it's got the 4-up invuln, so it can sit back, and even if your opponent's shooting at it, they probably aren't killing because it's got a 4-up invuln. So it's filling a similar place that the Hammerhead does.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that it's 45 more points than the Hammerhead.
Yeah.
And so I can get a dog unit for that. And I'm
Sure.
like, I'd rather have a dog and a Hammerhead than a Riptide.
Yeah.
Uh,
I've kind of
so
been
that's
to your point. Like, there's a lot. It does feel like there's like a lot of flexibility in list building. I've kind of toyed with the idea of playing a one of, which just seems totally foreign as someone who's only just every time I've played a Riptide, it's just been like three of them right now, like
yeah.
three every time. But yeah, I think you make a great point, right? The hammerheads with the +1 to wound, the extra shots. The burst cannons are really helpful with that being AP2. It is super silly. I mean, not that strength 6 to strength 8 is a big break point, but it is just hilarious to me that you could get the burst cannons up to strength 8 AP2 in this detachment.
Yeah.
It just feels like quite a silly number.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm gonna have to get some more games in myself because I think I've played 5 or 6 and I still haven't I don't feel like I've gotten it yet. Like, I believe in the detachment, like I know it's strong, I know the sauce is there, but as far as the positioning, I feel like it's something that you kind of have to like get reps with. It's not like a detachment
Yeah.
you can pick up and just do like great with immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely need reps with it. I'd say that the two things that make the detachment really powerful are the positioning, and the multiple uses of your auxiliary units. So that not only are they screens, but they're also OC and they're plus AP.
Yeah.
And that's all. And they're doing secondary. So you've
Sure.
got like, and then your opponent is killing those screens that only cost you 65 points. They're not killing your guns.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really powerful. And then the other half of it is interlocking maneuvers. So then your opponent like really has a tough time touching any of your units.
Mm-hmm.
In my game against Space Wolves, I had a turn where he was definitely in combat with my broadsides with one unit. Or no, this was Custodes. Sorry, this was my Custodes match
Mm-hmm.
round 4. He was in combat with my broadsides, and he had the option to pile into my hammerhead.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, hey, if you do that, I can interlocking maneuvers. And he's like, oh, maybe I don't want to do that. And I'm like, but that's just giving me the option. I know if you don't touch him, then I can definitely fall back with a broadside,
Mm-hmm.
and then I can shoot with the broadside. But if you do touch the hammerhead, then I've got choices now, and I might not be able to shoot this broadside.
Mm-hmm.
And he ends up doing it, and it ends up being that then I go 10 inches towards his home objective in the fallback, and then another 10 inches the next turn, and suddenly I've got behind
Oh no! With the
and engage or something like that with this one hammerhead, and he's like, this was a horrible mistake. Like, yeah, turned out to be a horrible mistake.
Oh man. Yeah, you can really
yeah,
fly with interlocking maneuvers, especially on a hammerhead. Like 20 inches is and I mean, like,
Yeah.
if you really wanted to, you could throw assault on it. It's like, okay, I'm going 26 inches. Like, the amount of things you can shoot 26 inches away. I mean, it's the whole board, like, at that point.
Yeah. So that stratagem makes this detachment, like, work so well because it's so many things. It's fallback and shoot, it's fallback and charge, and it's fallback and action.
Mm-hmm.
I had a turn where I was like, I think it was one of my practice games where I was just like, well, I've got a pair of Rampagers and a Coldstar Commander in combat here. I'm gonna fall back with the Rampagers, so they can charge the next turn. And then instead I drew like deploy homers. I'm like, I guess I'll just do deploy homers with these Rampagers and get 4 points to your DZ or something.
Freaking awesome. Yeah, I've had a couple of my games where I'd fall back to Rampagers, then I'd dump them right back into combat. I'd throw a grenade and I'd dump them right back into combat and be like, okay, here's 7 mortals for your time here today. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, cool.
Yep.
Thanks so much, Donald. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I greatly appreciate it. Thanks again to Donald for hopping on the channel, talking about your most recent experience. No matter the meta, it seems like Donald is winning a GT. So congrats again. Very well deserved. If you enjoyed the video today, please shoot me a like or comment for the algorithm. And I do have a Patreon, so if you'd like to support me there, it'd be greatly appreciated. That's going to do it for today's video. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.